to insects and are, when you spray them on the crop, it's not topical. It goes inside to all the cells, and so then we eat that too. There's that, and also there's genetically engineered crops that, say corn, you can spray an herbicide on it. You can spray glyphosate on it, and the corn's fine. But what that happens is they spray the whole freaking farm, and it kills all the weeds and weeds. There's a lot of land that has habitat that people are like, oh, that's nothing over there, when really it's super important habitat. If nothing else, for some insects, right, that somebody's going to eat. And so there's just less space, less food for insects. And yeah, so agriculture is a big part of the problem and can be part of the solution. There is birds. These are insectivores. Astro flycatcher, cliff swallow. These are predominantly insectivores year-round. Farmers should always try and support them any way they can. More insectivores, like the bush tit and the yellow warbler. There's carnivores. It's really easy to support barn owls, and there's some really cool studies. If you ever decide you want to study wildlife in agriculture, you should go to Humboldt State. There's a really cool professor up there. Has tons of, you guys are already, you may not want to do that, right? Because you're already, some of you undergraduate, a lot of you undergraduate? Okay, if you want to go get a master's, Matt Johnson at Humboldt State, he's now had 5 master's students look at different aspects of barn owls. And so, I mean, if I had to do my research over, how cool would that be to work with barn owls and get another degree? But
so I want to make a pitch for having an outside committee member, the master's students who are here. You might want
true.
to consider approaching him to be a reader on your thesis. It doesn't have to be in the program.
That is very true, Rachel. And when I did my master's, I had Don Dalston, who has since passed away, but he was an expert on birds in forest systems at UC Berkeley. And so while I had Lynn Trulio and somebody else on my committee from here, I had Don, who really guided me on, when I had a big stumbling block about detail, he was like, oh, well, you gotta try this. So, yeah, so there are birds that will be a problem sometimes or a lot of the time. And so the crows, starlings, sometimes sparrows. But it depends. It depends as in, sometimes a crow, like there's this cool study that looked at how crows will eat nuts in an almond orchard, but then later they are still around after the almonds have been harvested. And as you might imagine, not all the almonds get harvested. There's a few out there still that, maybe they're too green, or for some reason or another they didn't get harvested. And the grower has to get all of that out, or there's going to be pest insects that overwinter. And the crows come and eat those almonds, and so much so that they save the growers more money than if you didn't have the crows. Even if they're mechanically going in and re-harvesting, the crows save them money. So it depends. And like a songbird, like sparrows, some of the sparrows are feeding insects to their young, so they might be a problem in the winter. There's some growers that have a hedgerow, and the sparrows will come out and eat the little seedlings that come up. But they're beneficial in the other part of the year. So really, what growers can do is not plant something that they really like right next to the hedgerow, and that's usually what happens. Like they plant onions, but the birds aren't going to eat onions. maybe I'll just wrap it up saying that there's a farm we work with that has all these different birds, and if you look at it, they're foraging in different ways. And so how cool is that? Why not support all these different foragers that are helping you manage your pests? And this year, you should go to our website. We have a really cool, besides that publication I showed you, you can go to our resource section. But on our homepage, there's a scrolling set of images, and one of them will take you to this separate, we call it a story, multimedia story online platform. And anyway, so you go there, and it's all these beautiful scrolling images and teaches you about birds, and then there's also some cool videos. We've interviewed farmers and researchers, and they're just short videos, but they're fun to see the enthusiasm and all the science together, and what we've created all that to inspire farmers. And this last year we put on 4 events, and a couple of them we had over 100 farmers come, and they're excited about this, and we're going to do more this year. And yeah, so I'm excited about it too. So thank you for listening. Do you guys want to ask me anything? Ask me something hard, like, why are you doing birds? What about big farmers do? Yeah.
So thinking about your question, are you for or against biodiversity, and some of the pushback that you might have gotten. So I absolutely think that increasing biodiversity is key, but at the same time I see that some compromise needs to be made with production agriculture. I mean, to have like lettuce here and another lettuce here, you know, and everything interplanted just from a practical perspective can be hard for some market growers. So I guess what's the rule of thumb in trying to strike the balance between the two, like biodiversity and then just strictly cropping?
Right, right. Well, it's true. I mean, we're not talking about gardening, we're talking about farming, and so it depends on the landscape. When we go out and help a farmer, we look at like where's the water flowing. Any time, wherever it is, unless it's super flat, the water is flowing, and there should be some way to hold the soil in place when the rain hits. And so that is an ideal place for habitat. But also on the edges, wherever there's roads or division of fields, that's where hedgerows, that's where pollinators can be supported, or if the farm is so lucky to have riparian habitat, they shouldn't farm right up against to the water's edge. They need to back off and let the nature have some space, and also then that nature helps support the farm. So it really depends, but I think that's a really good question, because yeah, farmers gotta make a living, and farming is not easy. Especially the smaller farmers, they work super hard, and there's not a big margin. So usually when farmers work with us, it's incremental. They don't just start off and do everything at once. They might want to put up a bird box, or maybe they want to put in a hedgerow. What I started out with was the climate slide, so I'm going to bring it back to that. CalCan has made it possible that this year there's about 20 or 30 million available for farmers to put in hedgerows and other kinds of conservation practices that help. Like hedgerows are woody vegetation that store carbon, but other kinds of conservation practices. It's super cool. A farmer can act like up to $75,000 they could get to do this, and they're going to get their hands held to put those conservation practices in. And that's just a plug really for the state of California, who's so awesome and progressive at like help. They have a goal, we have a goal to meet a climate neutral balance, I think by 2045 or something. And so to reach that, we have to start gearing up, getting farmers to put in more habitat. So
Awesome, thank you.
I have a question.
Yeah,
So I was fascinated by the CCOF and certification portion of your presentation. I'm wondering if you could speak to just any low-hanging fruit or take-home points for the audience in terms of, like, these are pretty easy things for growers of a wide variety of size and a wide variety of crops to employ, where it's kind of like low-hanging fruit. It's not that hard to design, it doesn't cost that much to implement, but then the conservation bang for the buck is actually very, very good.
yeah, that's a really good question. Well, what we're telling all these certifiers is farmers have to at least support insects. So, and that means they really need to have flowers. They need to support pollinators. They need to support beneficial insects, because the beneficial, typically, not always, but the adult insects are eating the nectar, pollen, and the young beneficial insects are eating the pest. And so you need that food source for them. And also just habitat. They need to be on the farm year-round, so that when there's a pest, they're like, oh, we're gonna build up our populations and eat it. And so, yeah, so flowering plants is kind of like the lowest, the lowest base we feel like is where people should start. Yeah.
I know you guys, you talked about like how nature is supposed to like have its own biodiversity and everything, but have farmers thought about like training certain birds? You know, like you could have a rooster as your pet, right? But have farmers maybe wanted to train a certain bird to eat specific insects and have it on the farm like that, be more domesticated birds?
Yeah, there are geese that farmers have trained to eat weeds. I think you have to start when they're really young, and you have to you have to micromanage what they're eating, and so they're eating those weeds you really want, and then when they grow older, they're like, yeah, I like those weeds. Yeah, so that's cool too. I mean, any way that we can better integrate animals. I mean, respectfully treating them, right? Yeah. So, yeah.
I have a question. It's in urban agriculture, there is a lot of push for like planting milkweed or like creating pollinator hotels, and I know there have been lots of mistakes made in like with good intentions, like planting a variety that is not like native for the valley, or having the pollinators hotels that are like too small or not checking on them enough, and like the bees are actually dying there. Are there resources for like urban art that is in a smaller scale, like maybe like someone who has like half an acre or just a very dedicated gardener that is implementing these things in home?
Yeah, well, there's definitely the Xerces Society for Invertebrate Conservation. It's XERCES, which is a name for a butterfly that's almost extinct, I think, but XERCES. And they are awesome. They have taught so many people about pollinators. They have staff. They partner with USDA NRCS, which is different than the organic program. But they have a ton of staff all around the country, and so pollinators are embraced by USDA, which is really cool. But there's also Gordon Franke. He has an urban bee website. He's at UC Berkeley. It's not so much agriculture, it's more gardening, but it would probably be helpful too. No hard questions? Like, why would anybody do this?
I have a question. How could folks in this room get involved to help what you're trying to promote? What are the best things they could do to support you and join in this effort?
Yeah. Well, so you could call me, you could email me. You could just go to info@wildfarmalliance.org. If you remember, I said we are looking at going back through all of those 50 or so organic forms that these certifiers are using, and we want to see if they've done improvements, so that's a project, that would be a cool student project. I know I talked to one of your student colleagues who was looking at studying carbon in woody plants, and I love that idea, and so so like if you have a project that you think I might be interested in, not that I can't be on your committee, I'll just say, but what I can do is to introduce you to some people or give you some ideas on what, I think networking is, that word is kind of, I don't know, it's overused, but networking is super important. You're gonna see through your whole life, who you know is where you made change. And so the more people you know and really know and build that trust, the more you're gonna get where you wanna go.
All right, thank you.
So
Along those lines, do you have time for lunch, or are you gonna head straight out?